Have you ever felt that chill down your spine, that tightening in your chest, when you realize that to someone you loved so dearly, you've become nothing more than a nuisance? That bitter sensation of being discarded, of having your life and your sacrifice reduced to nothing more than an inconvenience? I know that feeling well. Believe me, I was buried alive, but I was a seed, and this story, my story, is a testament that dignity doesn't fade with time. And justice, oh, it has its own silent ways. Before we continue with this account, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. That way you won't miss upcoming stories like this one. My name is Agnes Periwinkle, and at 86 years old, my knees had already carried me through a lifetime of hard work, of sleepless nights caring for others. I was at the airport, ready for what was supposed to be a small getaway, a breath of fresh air, when the hurried voice of a young employee interrupted my thoughts. She asked me with a forced smile if I could give up my special seat, the one I paid extra for to alleviate the constant throbbing of my arthritis. I simply said yes, as I always had in life, without fuss. There were no complaints, not a hint of anger in my eyes, just the quietude of someone who has given so much that giving up a small comfort had become almost a reflex. As I stood up, feeling the discomfort in my joint, a familiar sensation invaded me, that of being a blur in the landscape, easily ignored, easily relocated. It felt like my existence there was more of an obstacle than a presence. I watched the young woman who took my place, radiant, without the slightest idea of the small sacrifice I had just made for her. She settled in, opening a book with a colorful cover, and a small sigh of resignation escaped my lips. It wasn't envy. It was just the silent realization of how life goes on, and some people just float by, while others, well, others carry the weight of the world on their shoulders and keep going. The airport buzz, which once seemed exciting, now sounded like a distant echo of my own irrelevance. I remembered the countless times my own mother told me, "Agnes, a generous heart is your greatest wealth." And there I was, reaping the fruits of decades of generosity, feeling emptied, almost transparent. It was a heavy feeling, as if every act of kindness had made me lighter. Until I disappeared. I settled into the cramped seat at the back of the aircraft and closed my eyes, trying to detach myself from the physical pain and that pang in my heart, to think of all the years I dedicated to my family, to neighbors, to the community, and now to be there, being moved aside like old furniture, was a silent blow. Did I truly deserve this, to be so easily forgotten? But what I didn't know was that sometimes the universe has a peculiar way of correcting injustices, and right there, a few feet away, a stranger with watchful eyes had witnessed the entire scene, and her discreet gaze was about to change the course of that flight in a way I could never have imagined. My knee, once agile on the Sierra Nevada trails, now protested with every movement, a constant reminder of an unfortunate fall during my time as an ecological expedition guide many years ago. In the back seat of the plane, squeezed between a large bag and the hard backrest, the pain wasn't just physical. It was the silent humiliation that weighed on me, a heavy cloak of invisibility that completely enveloped me. I tried to find a less uncomfortable position, but every adjustment seemed to worsen the situation. That paid seat, carefully chosen to alleviate the pressure on my debilitated knee, now belonged to someone else, and I, Agnes, was there, huddled, feeling every pang of pain, as a reminder of my own disregard. It was as if life was whispering, "You don't matter that much." As I struggled against the discomfort, a wave of melancholy hit me. I recalled the days when my presence was vital, when my advice was sought, and my hands were needed, guiding groups through dense forests and rushing rivers. Now, it seemed I was just a shadow, easily pushed into a corner, without anyone noticing the surrender in my eyes or the pain in my body. The cabin's silence, once peaceful, now seemed to mock me. I closed my eyes, trying to push away the tears that insisted on surfacing, not out of self-pity, but from a deep disappointment. It was the disappointment of seeing that the world kept spinning, indifferent to those who, like me, were once pillars, supports, and now found themselves on the sidelines, almost forgotten. The pain in my knee was just an echo of the greater pain I felt in my chest. I remembered a phrase my grandmother used to say, "A woman's dignity is not in what she has, but in what she endures with grace." And there I was, enduring with what dignity I had left, but with the feeling that my grace was fading along with the ability to stretch my legs. It was a test, I knew, but a test that seemed endless. I reached into my bag, searching for an old bookmark, a gift from a dear student decades ago. It was worn leather, with a small pressed flower inside. Whenever I felt forgotten, it reminded me that someone, at some point, had valued me. What I couldn't see from that forgotten corner was the subtle, almost imperceptible movement of a figure, a few rows ahead. She didn't say a word, but the indignation in her eyes was palpable, and her silence, unlike mine, wasn't of resignation, but of watchful observation, about to weave the next thread of this story. From my cramped corner, I couldn't see anything beyond people's heads and the plain ceiling. But the truth is, not all invisibility is total. Up front, in row 9, sat a woman, Clara Beaufort, with sharp blue eyes and a mind that didn't let even the slightest injustice go unnoticed. She had noticed everything, from the flight attendant's approach to my sad smile and my hesitant gait. Clara, a documentary producer accustomed to observing the nuances of real life, didn't like what she saw. That scene, for her, wasn't just an elderly lady giving up a seat. It was the embodiment of how society often discards the wisdom and value of the elderly. Her eyes followed my path to the back of the plane, and indignation grew in her chest, silent but powerful. She waited patiently until the flight attendant moved away to the cockpit. Then, with a quick and discreet movement, Clara picked up her cell phone, not to take a photo or film. Her objective was something else, much more effective. She typed a quick, concise message, addressed directly to the airline's customer service department, detailing what had happened, and the obvious discomfort of the elderly lady. The message wasn't angry. It was factual and carried a silent authority. Clara didn't ask for a refund for me, nor punishment for the flight attendant. She simply described the situation, emphasizing my medical condition and the dignity with which I had given up my seat. Her focus was on the subtle yet glaring injustice she had witnessed, something her narrative instinct couldn't ignore. While I was trying to accommodate my aching knee in the narrow seat, completely oblivious to what was happening, Clara put her phone away with the same discretion with which she had taken it out. She knew that a small seed of action, planted in the right place, could grow into something much bigger than expected. After all, the biggest revolutions often start with a simple click, a message sent in the quiet of the day. And now I want to know from you, what would you do in this situation? Comment below. I read all the comments, and I'm very happy to know what you think. She had no idea of the whirlwind of events that simple message was about to unleash, a whirlwind that would directly hit the cockpit, where a man, with decades of memory, was about to receive a notification that would change everything. In the cockpit, oblivious to the small scene unfolding in the passenger cabin, Captain Arthur Beaumont was reviewing the final details of his flight plan. An aviation veteran with over 30 years of experience, Arthur had seen everything in the skies, but nothing prepared him for the notification that flashed on his screen that morning. It was a discreet message, but the name on it hit him like lightning. Agnes Periwinkle. The name resonated in his mind like an ancient bell, echoing from a distant, almost forgotten past. Agnes Periwinkle. Could it be her? Captain Arthur felt a shiver down his spine. It wasn't a common name, and the coincidence, on a plane under his command, was too strong to be ignored. His mind flew to a small community school in a rural area of Colombia, amidst poverty and neglect, more than 4 decades ago. He was just a boy, a young man with vision problems and dyslexia, labeled slow and troubled. when a teacher with kind eyes and infinite patience took him in. She was Agnes, and her private lessons under the shade of a mango tree, her words of encouragement, and the way she taught him to love books were the anchor that kept him afloat in a sea of hopelessness. She saved his education, yes, but more than that. She saved his future. That debt of gratitude, though silenced by time, had never truly disappeared. Arthur read the message again. The description of an elderly lady with knee problems, giving up her seat with dignity. There was no longer any doubt. It was her, the woman who, in one of the most crucial moments of his life, had been a beacon of compassion and wisdom, a teacher who, with her dedication and humanity, had left an indelible mark on his soul. A wave of emotion washed over the captain, a mixture of gratitude and unexpected fury. How could they treat Agnes this way? That woman, an example of dedication, being relegated to the back of the plane, forgotten and undervalued? Not on his flight, not under his command. He could not allow the heroine of his past to be treated with such indifference, with a determination that surprised even his first officer. Captain Arthur Beaumont turned off the intercom. That flight was about to witness not just a takeoff, but a powerful lesson about respect, gratitude, and the rediscovery of a value that time could never erase. And Agnes, in the back, was about to be remembered in a way that would change everything. Captain Arthur's heart pounded, not with the adrenaline of an emergency, but with the conviction of a mission. He knew what he had to do. He opened the intercom, and his voice, usually calm and professional, now carried a tone of unquestionable authority, reverberating throughout the cabin. "Flight attendant," he called. "I request the immediate presence of Ms. Agnes Periwinkle in first class." A murmur of surprise spread through the cabin. Who was Agnes Periwinkle, and why was the captain calling her like that, with such solemnity? I, in the back, barely heard my name pronounced, but when the flight attendant approached with a confused smile, indicating she meant me, I felt a mix of strangeness and a slight panic. What could it be? The flight attendant, visibly flustered, seemed embarrassed. Her eyes avoided mine for an instant, as if acknowledging that something unfair had happened. Still, she led me down the aisle. Every step was an effort for my knee, and I felt the curious glances of the passengers following me. The young woman who had taken my business class seat now watched me with an expression of pure perplexity. I didn't understand what was happening, but a tiny pang of hope, minuscule as a seed, began to sprout in my chest. Upon arriving in first class, Captain Arthur Beaumont himself, impeccably uniformed, waited for me at the entrance. His gaze, which before had seemed just a face in a uniform, now fixed on me with an intensity that made me step back. "Ms. Periwinkle," he said, his voice resonating. "It's an honor to have you on board. Where were you sitting? Please come, this is your seat." He gestured to a spacious seat in the first row. The entire cabin fell silent. The respect in his voice was palpable, and the way he treated me, with a deference I hadn't received in years, made my heart warm. This wasn't just a first-class seat. It was a recognition, a public restoration of dignity. I felt tears welling in my eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, no longer of sadness. As I sat down, I realized I was still holding the bookmark in my hands. Arthur looked at it and smiled with his eyes. "You still have that? I remember you used one just like it in class to mark your favorite passages in books," he said. But Captain Arthur didn't stop there. With a warm smile, he turned to the cabin, and his next sentence, spoken with clarity and emotion, was about to reveal a secret from the past that connected our lives in a way I never could have imagined. Leaving everyone on board holding their breath, with a voice thick with emotion, yet firm, Captain Arthur Beaumont addressed all passengers over the public address system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a true hero on board. Ms. Agnes Periwinkle, who has just taken her rightful place in first class, is the woman who, 40 years ago, in a small rural school in Colombia, as a dedicated teacher, saved my life and gave me the foundation to be who I am today. A gasp of astonishment swept through the cabin. Sitting there, I could barely believe what I was hearing. Captain Arthur? The little Arthur I had taught to read? With those thick glasses? And that ever-curious gaze? My eyes filled with tears as I saw him, now a strong and respected man, standing before me, thanking me publicly. Time had been kind to him, and memory even more so. He continued, his voice becoming more personal, more intimate. I remember her caring for me, a boy with difficulties, with a serenity that calmed everyone. She didn't just teach letters. She calmed souls and ignited curiosity. It is because of her that I am here today, flying this plane, fulfilling my dream. The silence in the cabin was almost reverent, and I felt every gaze turn to me, no longer with curiosity, but with a respect that made me tremble. It was then that a man, sitting 2 rows back, slowly stood up. His eyes were moist and his face contorted with emotion. "Miss Periwinkle?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "My name is Ricardo Alarcón. I was in Lima, Peru in 2005 after the big landslide. I was one of the volunteers you guided, teaching first aid amidst the chaos. Do you remember?" I looked at him, and then the clear image of a young man with eyes full of pain and hope appeared in my mind. "Ricardo," I whispered, barely believing it. It was him, that unexpected reunion, right there, in the middle of the sky, under the watchful eyes of so many strangers, validated not only my life and my service, but the purpose of every choice, every sacrifice. It was as if all the seeds I had planted were blooming at once. The emotion was palpable, the reunion with Arthur and now with Ricardo. Right there, before everyone's eyes, was a gift life was giving me. But the story still had more to reveal, for Captain Arthur's gratitude and the memory of Clara Beaufort, the woman in row 9, were about to resonate far beyond that plane, changing the perception not only of the passengers, but of a long-forgotten past. Captain Arthur Beaumont's announcement resonated far beyond the aircraft's loudspeakers. It wasn't just a tribute. It was a call, an awakening to memory and respect. Passengers, previously immersed in their own travel bubbles, now looked at me not as a fragile old lady, but as Agnes Periwinkle, the teacher and volunteer who had touched so many lives with courage and compassion. The flight attendants, who had previously seen me only as a seat number to be reassigned, now approached with genuine smiles and words of admiration. The atmosphere in the cabin changed drastically. The respectful silence transformed into a wave of murmurs and gentle glances, each one a silent validation of my legacy. I felt as if a fog that had covered me for years was finally dissipating. Ricardo, the man I had guided in Lima, kept thanking me, his eyes teary. He began to tell his own version of the story, of how my calm and determination amidst the chaos of the disaster had been the light at the end of his tunnel. His spontaneous testimony was more powerful than any speech, living proof that kindness, even in small gestures, can have an eternal impact. The story of my bravery and sacrifice began to spread by word of mouth throughout the plane. People asked to take photos with me, wanted to shake my hand, and some even approached to share their own stories of encounters with mentors and caregivers. It was as if that small act of giving up my seat had unveiled a tapestry of memories and gratitude that was just waiting to be revealed. I, Agnes, who had felt invisible minutes before, was now the center of kind and sincere attention. It was a bittersweet feeling, the sadness of having felt so forgotten, mixed with the joy of finally being recognized in such a public and emotional way. It was as if each of those passengers became a guardian of my story, an echo of my journey. But what I didn't know was that this in-flight recognition was just the prelude to something much bigger, something that was being orchestrated by an official department, driven by a forgotten letter from a distant past, waiting for the right moment to emerge and bring long-buried truths to light. 2 weeks after that extraordinary flight, Agnes Periwinkle's life, which seemed to have returned to its quiet routine, was turned upside down by an envelope stamped from the Ministry of Education. My heart raced. I could barely believe what my eyes were reading. It wasn't a bill, nor a flyer, but an official letter, formal, yet with a warmth that hit me squarely. The letter began with a formal apology. "Dear Ms. Periwinkle, we are writing on behalf of the Ministry of Education to express our deep regret for an error in our records." Error in records? What could it be? My hands trembled as I continued to read. Consumed by curiosity, it revealed the existence of a forgotten merit report, dated 1980, detailing my exceptional services as a rural teacher in an isolated region. A report that, due to some bureaucratic error, had never been processed. Along with it was an original handwritten message from a young student I had taught, Pedro Almeida. He spoke of my tireless dedication and how I had refused to close the school, even when the community was being emptied. Pedro's voice, so clear and full of gratitude in the lines of that old letter, transported me back to that dusty, hopeful setting. I remembered him, a boy with worn shoes, but with a thirst for learning that motivated me. I had comforted him, cared for his small injuries, and promised him that education would change his life. That report and his letter were the validation of a past I thought had been swallowed by time. Tears streamed down my face, not of sadness, but of profound relief. It was as if an immense weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't just official recognition, it was confirmation that my sacrifice and dedication, even if forgotten by systems, were etched in the hearts of those I helped. That letter was a balm for a wounded soul, a testament that truth always finds its way to light. But the letter didn't end there. There was an invitation, a proposal that would take me out of my small world and place me once again at the center of a larger story. An invitation that would seal not only my legacy, but reconnect me with people and purposes I had judged lost forever. The letter from the Ministry of Education wasn't just a rescue from the past. It was a passport to a present full of new possibilities. The invitation to a forum for educators and social innovators in São Paulo was a chance, for the first time, to share my story on a bigger stage, to give voice to the memories I had held in my heart for so long. Anxiety mingled with excitement, a delightful mix that made me feel alive again. At the forum, the atmosphere was one of inspiration and collaboration. Educators from different generations gathered, sharing their experiences, challenges, and creative solutions. When it was my turn to speak, my voice slightly choked with emotion, I began to narrate my journey as a rural teacher. Words flowed, and I saw in the audience's eyes the identification, the silent understanding of those who have experienced the passion for teaching and transforming. And it was there, amidst applause and tears of emotion, that the impossible happened. A gray-haired man, with a slight limp and a smile that seemed familiar, approached me after my lecture. "Agnes, is that really you?" "It's me, Mario Fernandez, from the Villa Esperanza community in 1980, where you taught. I saw you working tirelessly, even when resources were scarce and hope seemed to fade. I never forgot your strength and your faith in us." My heart skipped a beat. Mario. I remembered him, a young farmer who always brought fresh fruit to the school, a silent ally in difficult times. Our memories intertwined, and for hours, under the curious eyes of the other educators, we shared stories, laughter, and some tears. That reunion was living proof that dignity and bravery echo through time and human connections. The experience at the forum, and especially the reunion with Mario, wasn't just about the past. It was about the present, about the confirmation that the value of a life dedicated to others is never lost. It was the feeling of belonging again, of being seen and celebrated for who I truly was, and not for who time or circumstances made me seem. But the resonance of my story had not yet ended. The seed of kindness planted on that flight, observed by Clara Beaufort, was about to bloom in an unexpected way, in a pure and innocent gesture that would show me the true meaning of legacy. Days after returning from the forum, still floating on the wave of emotion and recognition, a small box arrived at my door. Inside I found a colorful drawing and a letter written in childlike handwriting, a bit crooked, but full of intention. The sender was Livia Beaufort, a girl of just 10 years old, Clara's daughter, the woman who had witnessed my sacrifice on the plane. The letter read, "Dear Miss Agnes, my mum told me what happened on the plane. She said you were very brave and kind, even when no one was paying attention. I drew you with a smile, because Mom said you deserve all the smiles in the world. I promise I will try to be brave and kind, even when no one sees me, just like you." Livia's words hit me like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. It wasn't the official honors, nor the applause of the educators that would seal my legacy, but a child's promise to carry forward the seed of kindness. It was the purest and truest recognition, coming from a heart that had just learned the value of empathy through my story. The drawing, with its simple lines and vibrant colors, showed me smiling, holding a small book and a pencil, surrounded by hearts. It was the most honest representation of who I wished to be, and the impact I had, unknowingly, made. I, Agnes Periwinkle, was not just a forgotten teacher or a discarded elder. I was an inspiration, a silent example of resilience and compassion. In the drawing, I noticed a detail that brought a silent smile to my face. In my hand, there was a small bookmark with a flower in the middle. Clara must have told her about it. It was proof that even the small symbols of our history can touch generations. I understood at that moment that true legacy is not in monuments or titles, but in the lives we touch, in the seeds of kindness we plant, and in the lessons that, almost invisibly, we pass on. Little Livia, with her simple promise, was living proof that emotional justice, the kind that calms the soul and restores value, blossoms in the most unexpected places. My journey, which began with the silent pain of being ignored, ended in peace, restored in value and autonomy. I had been buried alive, yes, but like a seed. I germinated, I bloomed, and now the beauty of my life and the impact of my existence spread, eternalized in a child's promise and in the memory of those I touched. And so, with a peaceful heart, I knew that my story, Agnes's story, would continue to echo. I was buried alive, but I was a seed. Now I bloom in the eyes of a child who promises to carry on my legacy. If this story touched you in any way, please like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what country you're watching from. I read all the comments, and I'm very happy to see where you're all tuning in from and what you think of these accounts.